Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the event, the Giant Magellan Telescope, opportunities from the most powerful telescope on Earth for Latin America's research and innovation. Thank you very much for coming. I'd like to mention that for the following event, we will have simultaneous translation. So you just need to go to the icon and click on interpretation, and you can have the event in Spanish. Throughout the event, we'll have the Zoom Q&A feature activated. So simply post your questions in the chat and our experts will answer them as you ask them. Now, without further ado, we will begin, and I have the honor of introducing Florencia Atendemo Hurt, the General Manager of the Southern Cone countries and the IDB country rep of Chile.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Bienvenidos, bienvenidos. I know many of you are listening to us from Latin America. We are here in hot and humid Washington, D.C., but we are very, very excited to be sharing with you information about our great partner in Chile and in the region, GMTO. Chile is the best place on Earth from where to observe the universe. Those who live there think it's the best place on Earth, full stop. Currently, 50% of the capacity in space observation is located in Chile, and soon that will become 70%. Most of the operational telescopes and those under construction are the result of multinational cooperation efforts. We are better together always. Chile benefits from this location because its astronomers get to use a percentage of the total observation time for their own research. Today, we'd like to present a new opportunity for the region represented by the development of the largest optical telescope ever engineered, the Giant Magellan Telescope, to be also located in Chile. From the IDB, we'd like to use the opportunity to share with the scientific community in our region information about the project and the possibilities we believe it's open for Latin America and the Caribbean, and specifically for its research institutions. This afternoon, we have a first panel that will tell us about the details of the project. We'll be hearing about it from Dr. Robert Shelton. Thank you, Robert. Robert is the president of the Giant Magellan Telescope Organization, GMTO. He assumed his position after being a president at the University of Arizona. And from Professor Claudia Lucia Mendes de Oliveira, bem-vinda, professora. She's a professor in the Astronomy Department of the University of São Paulo. Her research interests are focused on the study of nearby galaxies and their evolution in different environments. She's one of the coordinators of the so-called GMT Brazil office, created to organize and maximize the activities of Brazilians in three main areas: research, instrumentation, and outreach, in the context of the FAPESP participation in GMT, which is the first, and so far the only, we hope not for too long, Latin American institution to be a formal member of the GMTO. After this panel, we will have a group conversation where representatives of Latin America scientific institutions will explore in an open roundtable the opportunities that GMT opens for the region. As audience, we have invited science and innovation institutions in Latin America and the Caribbean who are joining us online, as well as IDD staff interested on the topic. I'm truly looking forward to learning together with you this afternoon. Thank you very much, and back to you.
Thank you very much, Florencia, and Robert, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you all. It's a great pleasure to be here. I don't know where to begin except to say thanks to all of you for making this possible. Of course, Florencia, you and your colleagues said we would put this together last spring when we had a chance to meet for the first time in Santiago, and you've done it. And Gabrielle, I'm sure I can find you on the screen when I see you. Thank you, because I know you've been a big, big factor in organizing all of this. So really, it is a great pleasure. And let me begin. As you heard, I'm here of the great fortune to represent the Giant Magellan Telescope. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about why we are so excited about it. This is our tagline, "The universe awaits," and I urge you to go to our website. You will see this in more dynamic, moving video, and it will give you a real clear sense of what this Giant Magellan Telescope is going to do for humanity. not just for astronomers. First and foremost, some of the numbers. Okay, the Giant Magellan Telescope is one of 3 ELTs, extremely large telescopes under construction, 2 in Chile, one to the north of us, that is the European Southern Observatory. You fly into Antofagasta and go up into the mountains. Ours, the Giant Magellan Telescope, is a bit south of that at the southern edge of the Atacama Desert. It's in regions 3 and 4 in Chile. And that is a short 2.5-hour drive from the coastal town of La Serena, Coquimbo. And then there is a third that they hope to get under construction in the northern hemisphere on the big island of Hawaii. And that is the 30-meter telescope. So the GMT is unique in many reasons, for many reasons. First of all, it is the one that has the largest mirrors ever made to construct the rose petal configuration for the Giant Magellan Telescope. Each of these mirrors is 8.4 meters in diameter, the largest that can be made. They're made at the University of Arizona, Richard F. Karras Mirror Lab. I have to get in that plug. And you take and configure 6 of them in a petal configuration and 1 in the middle for 7. So you get, as shown on the screen, you get 25.4 meter diameter telescope. You heard also from Florencia that this is the best place in the world to do ground-based astronomy. So why do we build bigger telescopes? We started with Galileo. Let me make sure I know this works. And in this timeline here, you can see 1600s, 1700s, we had telescopes that allowed us to explore our solar system. We had telescopes that told us, somewhat blasphemous, that the Earth was not center of the universe. That gave the Catholic Church, I was raised Catholic, okay, it's okay for me to say this, gave the Catholic Church a bit of heartburn at times. Then as the size of the telescope, that's on the vertical axis, got larger, that allowed us to collect more light and to see greater distances, or to see at the same distance with greater resolution. We understood that, well, the solar system is just a teeny part of the universe. It's part of a galaxy, our galaxy, cleverly known as the Milky Way. That took us up through the 19th century. And then finally, as we got close to what we're seeing now, the telescopes that were the 8-meter telescopes, the 10-meter telescopes like the Keck telescope, now we were able to probe more deeply into the universe. Think of these telescopes as time machines, real, genuine time machines, right? Because the light from the stars left long ago. Light travels fast, but not infinitely fast. So the farther back you can look in distance, the farther back you look in time. And with these new telescopes, like the Giant Magellan Telescope, we will be able to look to the first 100 million or so years after the Big Bang to see how galaxies formed, to see how the stars turned on, to see basically what the elements that we now know make up the universe came into being. They will also let us look at potential areas for life elsewhere in the universe. Okay, you can read. I hesitate to just read things, but you can see here that the real key is this second paragraph. With this 25.4 meter diameter telescope, it will be 10 times more powerful than the Hubble, 4 times more powerful than the James Webb. Those are both mainly infrared telescopes, and up to 200 times more powerful than any telescope that we have now for ground-based research. Now, that doesn't mean the Hubble and the Webb are obsolete, not at all. They're highly complementary. Okay? The Webb, for example, is an infrared telescope. We also do infrared, but we also do optical wavelengths. And if you're going to look for the signatures of life elsewhere in the universe, those molecules, methane, carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide, diatomic oxygen, water, those signatures are going to be both in the optical and the infrared. And so you have to cover the entire electromagnetic spectrum if you are going to determine whether signs of life, signatures of life exist elsewhere. You can see as you get bigger, the resolution gets increasingly more profound. Here's some of the examples of the kind of science that we can do with the James Webb and now going to the Giant Magellan Telescope. The one that it really intrigues the average citizen, the average amateur astronomer, is, are we alone in the universe? Until about the late 60s, we didn't know that any planets existed outside of our solar system. That recently. Now we know that there are billions of planets within our solar system and tens of millions that are rocky, and maybe a couple million that are in what's called the Goldilocks zone. That is, they're not too hot, they're not too cold. They have the capacity to hold and to preserve the characteristics of life as we know it. Water. Water is the big one. So that first bullet there, are we alone in the universe, is a huge draw for many people. But then you can look at the more esoteric, the more fundamental science, how stars are born, how galaxies grow, how the entire universe has evolved. Now, some people might say, well, this is all fine and good, but we've got a lot of issues here on Earth, and we do. You know, there are a lot of things we want to take care of. National Institutes of Health, clean water, many, many important things, all the diseases that we encounter or our friends encounter. But the one thing about astronomy that is unique in these sciences is its ability to inspire young people of all backgrounds. Maybe they come out of a very sophisticated society. Maybe they come out of a very basic society where they're worried about getting that water, but they look up at the night sky and they see those stars and they wonder, as humankind has done for millennia, they wonder, are we alone? They wonder, what can I learn from this? I mentioned to other people that when you talk to young children, the two areas of science that get them most excited, talking about the 3-year-olds, the 4-year-olds, 5, 6, 7, doesn't matter where they come from, what their background, the two areas that get them most excited are astronomy, the stars, and dinosaurs, right? And so astronomy is really a gateway science to bringing more and more people from diverse backgrounds into STEM disciplines. Okay, broad picture. Now let me focus a little bit more, emphasis on the word focus, on the Giant Magellan Telescope. You can see here the configuration. You can see the 7 primary mirrors. Each one of those is, as I said, 8.4 meters apart in diameter. And then up at the very top, I don't know how to point to this. That's my bad. Do I have a pointer? Well, look up at the top. It's in the upper left. You can see another structure up there that holds 7 secondaries, right? So the light comes from the distant star, comes down through that, comes to the primary mirrors, gets reflected up to the 7 secondaries, and then down through that hole in the middle of the middle primary segment, and the instrumentation is below. Okay? That's very important because what we have here is the most efficient possible way to get light into the instruments. My chief scientist, Rebecca Bernstein, she tells me that telescopes are fine, but all they do is collect light. It's the instruments that do science. She's an instrument builder, obviously, okay? And so what we have here is only 2 reflections before the light gets into the instrument. Why is that important? Well, you want to collect as much light as possible. You want to preserve that intensity. Each time you undergo a reflection, you're losing some of that. You know, the mirrors aren't perfect reflectors. Maybe they're 90%. You know, maybe they're 80% after they've been in for a while. You have to take them out periodically and clean them. That's quite a process. Imagine taking this 18-ton mirror segment, just one of them, lifting it up and out, and then taking it to a neighboring building that I will show you, and having it cleaned, okay? With only 2 reflections, we're losing the least amount of optical power The Europeans, they're building a magnificent telescope. It will be great. They have 5 reflections before they can get into the instruments. Okay, so the design of the Giant Magellan Telescope has some unique power to it that the other ELTs don't have. Again, they're going to be great too, but I'm here to talk about the GMT. Let me talk a little bit about how this came about. I first learned of this when I was president at the University of Arizona, where the mirrors were being made. And in fact, my predecessor, Wendy Friedman, who was president of the GMT, she kept calling me and she said, when are you going to finish polishing that first off-axis mirror? Because no one had ever done an off-axis mirror before. The central mirror is a parabola. They'd done those before, but the off-axis mirrors have different curvature, right? Because it all has to look like one big parabola. And it wouldn't converge, the polishing wouldn't converge. You're talking about nanometers here. And finally it did. So that was my first exposure to the GMT. I was fortunate enough to be selected to be the president 6.5 years ago. And here on this graph, you can see the remarkable institutions worldwide that are making the GMT a reality. There are 13. You can see we have representation in the States, of course, in South America with FAPESP, and of course, Chile, our host, a marvelous, gracious host. In Asia, we have the Korean Astronomy and Space Sciences Institute, KASI, 2 entities in Australia. And then in late 21, I think it was, we brought our most recent founder, all of our partners, our members, we call them founders, and that is the Weizmann Institute in Israel. We continue to talk with great science, great engineering organizations around the world about joining us. That is why we hope we can convey our excitement and get some more representation out of Latin America. But you can see you're in good company. These are some of the very best institutions in the world. And what do we love about them? Well, we love that they give us money, help us build this, and I'll come to the dollars in a minute. But we also love the fact that they have so many smart people, mostly young people, like I see sitting around the table here, who are energetic, who are eager to do something that's never been done before. Not necessarily astronomers, but engineers, software engineers, optical engineers, data management people. All of these people get involved and they contribute to the growth of the Giant Magellan Telescope, and the founder gets credit for those kinds of contributions. And Claudia may speak to that a little bit. So speaking of Claudia, I'm going to turn it over to her now, and she can give you a flavor for what the FAPESP experience has been as a founder of the Giant Magellan Telescope. Claudia?
Thank you very much, Robert. It's a pleasure for me to be here and to speak about our experience being a member of GMT since 2014. So in 2014, FAPESP, which is the funding agency that funds research in the state of São Paulo, so just one state of Brazil, has given $40 million at the time and later 10 million more for all the institutions in the state of São Paulo to join GMT. So we have made we have formed a group called the GMT Brazil office. And since 2015, we have been coordinating all the activities in different areas. So what are these areas? FAPESP's goal in being a founder and being a member of GMT was first to allow the young astronomers to have the facility in the next decade. We know well how important this is in order to do forefront science. But also, FAPESP had a main goal of creating an astronomical instrumentation group, which was inexistent in São Paulo at that time. And also to foster participation of Brazilian industry in the construction of the telescope. And this is still coming in the future because the telescope is to be still built. And also to bring science topics closer to our society with our programs of outreach and education for students and young people. We have events, and these are main people that help building the collaboration. Professor João Steiner at the time, he started this, and now we have a large group that is behind this effort. Robert, could you please go to the next? This is a picture of a visit that Robert and Jennifer in 2018 made to our institute at São Paulo, the Institute of Astronomy and Geophysics in IAG, São Paulo. We discussed at the time several issues, but one of the things that I'd like to bring to your attention is that even before the telescope is ready, we already have a lot of scientific gains, because right away, our institute in São Paulo, for example, became a magnet for the very best PhD students. We got new positions from the university as a counterpart for the funding that FAPESP had given. And we also got, with these new positions, early career faculty that are very bright. And this group then can help us decide what is best to do with GMT and also get prepared for this. So it creates an environment of scientific discussions in the community that really came to make a difference. So even now, we already can feel the scientific gains 10 years before the telescope is ready. And also we know that it's very necessary to start 20 years ahead thinking of the new facilities. We are part of SOAR, we are part of the 2 Gemini, but we know that in the next decade, if we are not part of a large facility, we really cannot do competitive science. So we'd like to work with the best groups, and I think this is really important for our young generation. Robert, could you go to the next? One other very important topic that FAPESP wanted us to develop is this instrumentation group, as I have told you. The instrumentation group wasn't existent before, and the GMT gave us the chance to get started in several areas. I can show you here the several areas that we have right now. We are acting in astronomy, in systems engineering, optics, optomechanics, software and controls, electronics, simulations. And in all these different projects, they are mainly the instruments of GMT and also in GMT itself. So at the very beginning in 2015-16, we started contributing with some people in Brazil that would then be hired by GMTO. So we have few Brazilians there, and they act as bridges, in fact. But then now we are in another phase where we are just working with GMT remotely, about 30 engineers in different areas, and this really brings formation for our young people that can then also contribute to all these first-class instruments. So this has been a wonderful collaboration that we started. It took some years to consolidate this, but this is really going well now. We have about 30 direct people and another 30 that indirectly also are related to GMT somehow. So besides instrumentation, Brazil also, FAPESP was also very interested that we foster the industry participation. And we have become much more closer to the industry, the academics with industry. We have several contacts, and we will be ready for all the call for proposals when the telescope starts building its parts and also the instruments. Next one. I would like to focus specifically in this one instrument, GMAX, the Giant Magellan Telescope Multi-Object Astronomical and Cosmological Spectrograph. This is just one of the many instruments that GMT will have. The instruments are really important for a telescope. It's like a telescope are the eyes, but you also need the brain. So you really need this very powerful and instruments that will do your science. And we are very happy to participate in 2 of the optical spectrographs, also because they will be probably the instruments that the Brazilian community mostly work with. So the GMAX specifically is where most of our people are acting. And we are very thankful for this collaboration since 2016. Robert, the next one. One very important point also, which is a bit different in Chile and in Brazil. In Chile, I'm always very surprised by how much the people in the streets and everybody knows astronomy and they breathe astronomy everywhere because of all the telescopes that are there. In Brazil, we're still far away from that, and the funding agency now, FAPESP, for every big project that it funds, it's necessary for us to show how we are going to give this back to the community. We need to make the university closer to the community. And GMT has really brought a way for us to do it. We have a new education for a course in education for high school high school teachers, in order to teach them astronomy and make them multiply this knowledge. And also we have a very strong video program now. We first did a series of a dozen videos of science to be done with GMT. And also now we are doing some ones about the instruments that are going to do the science of GMT. So I think this is quite important also for diffusing the information to the general public. Next one, Robert. And finally, I would like to say that I have been a board member of the GMT board. I was a GMT board member until 2022 for 5 years. So I can confirm that we, all founders, all participants, all members are heard, our opinions are heard, and we feel like we are part of the team, and we make decisions together to the direction of the observatory. This is a very important point to make, because it's not always the case. So the international partners are taken with a lot of respect, and we are heard, feel really heard. And I think that we had a success experience in GMT. Of course, we are just starting. We are 8 years now that we have been members, but I think it was a great investment. FAPESP is very happy about the investment it made, and we hope to bring this good experience to you and to the rest of Brazil and to other Latin American countries. And if in the end that there are any questions, I'm here to answer. Thank you, Robert. Back to you.
Thank you so much, Claudia. I want to just say a few words. Claudia was an incredible contributor when she was on the board of directors, and she remains so. Fortunately for us, she did not go back and focus entirely on all of her great astronomy work, which she does with great style, but she continues to be a strong representative for us in Brazil, certainly in São Paulo, and creating ideas, giving us new ways in which the technical talent from FAPESP can continue to grow and contribute to the Giant Magellan Telescope. One example of what Claudia mentioned at the end, namely the role of the international partners, I think tells it all. This is a $2.5 billion US project. We feel it's the largest public-private partnership in the States right now. Typically, when the US builds Webb or Hubble, they just use the federal dollars. But in this case, our founders are bringing half of those dollars to the table. And I can talk to you about where we are in that. So public-private partnership. The National Science Foundation that is going to contribute the $1.25 billion, notice how I say that with confidence, okay? That means they get to allocate 50% of the observing time, and the founders will have 50% of the observing time. But we've made it very clear, and the NSF has agreed, when we complete this deal that our international partners, as well as US institutions, are eligible to compete for the NSF funded time. Make that clear. NSF, 50% of the time, you usually think about that as a small college in the US, a large university in the US, it's not a founder, they could compete for that time. But in this case, the founders, US and international, also have eligibilities to compete for that, a portion of that 50%, in addition to the amount they get reserved for their own use based on how much money they contribute. So it really is a very powerful position to be in. If you control, pick a number, 5 nights a year of the 300 nights that are typically available because of the great weather in Chile, if you control 5 nights, you could match that as a teaser, as a leader to get another 5 nights from the NSF portion. So we really think that this is very impactful for all of our founders. I want to follow some of Claudia's marvelous photos with people to just say how grateful we are to Chile. We hold that country in very high regard. They are gracious, they are generous hosts, and we never, never take it for granted. We have frequent visits to the science ministry, to other ministers. We have events where we host a lot of young Chileans to learn more about careers in astronomy. The one that you see on the left was held recently with Marianne Cox, who is our software engineer, and she spoke to, you can tell, a large number of young Chilean women who are thinking about going into the sciences. And there's about a 3-minute video on YouTube that Oscar Contreras and others put together that I was teary-eyed because it was so powerful in demonstrating what astronomy can do to inspire people to careers in the sciences and in the technical disciplines. So let me talk, in some ways this may be a little in the weeds, but let me just talk briefly about who we are, okay? We are headquartered in Pasadena, California. You saw the 13 institutions that are founders. We hope to make a 14th, a 15th. We are a charity, whatever that means. Well, it means a lot to a donor that gives us money to build the telescope because that person gets a tax write-off in the States. And there's something that we all try to read as little as possible, and that is the governance document with the acronym TARFA. The point here is it's a very well-organized institution. As I said earlier, why are institutions incentivized to join? Well, I think the bottom line is if an institution wants to be in the forefront of ground-based observing for the next 50 years, that's the expected lifetime of the GMT, 50 years. If you want to be in the forefront, in the top 20, top 30, top 40 in the world, you have to have access to an extremely large telescope. You absolutely do. And we feel we are the one that is the most compatible for joining in the following sense. I mean, all 3 of these ELTs will be magnificent. But the Europeans, that's for Europe, okay? European countries, they're building one. The one in the Northern Hemisphere has a couple of great universities in California. I used to be associated with one. In fact, I was on the Keck governing board when Caltech and the University of California built Kecks. And then they have institutions, other nations. They have Canada, Japan, India. So in other words, it's a federal government oriented approach, which is fine. In our case, we have from the very beginning felt the value of bringing in great public and private universities and research institutions. I think in part, it may be because we are on land that the Carnegie Institution has secured from the government of Chile. And Carnegie has, for over 60 years, I think, been a very good partner with that government. So people join if they want to, as Claudia mentioned, attract talent, whether it's students, postdocs, faculty, whether they want to see their names on papers that say life elsewhere in the universe, the signatures of life was discovered by this instrument at this Giant Magellan Telescope, or whatever it might be. Let me show you a few of the photos to demonstrate that this is real. We have, this is a stargazing terrace you see on the left, named after a family that gave us a little bit of money. You can see the magnificence of the area. Now, this is a rendering of what it will look like when it's completed. I'll show you the current state in a minute. Okay, so what you have on the right is obviously the observatory itself, the enclosure building. The enclosure building will be 22 stories high. It will rotate. So imagine a 22-story building rotating. And it's so well engineered, or will be so well engineered, that a 1 horsepower motor can rotate this building. It holds the telescope mount, the instruments, the mirrors, everything that makes it an observatory inside. On the left, the large building to the left of that is where we recoat the mirrors and hold other important activities. And then if you come down the road, you see 2 support sites. One, the higher one is the shops, the technical support, and the lower one has sleeping quarters, recreation quarters, food services, etc. So let me go and show you an actual picture of the site, a drone picture, obviously. You can see that the, can I do this? You can see right here is the excavation. That's about 50 meters across. You can see the deep channel here that takes the utilities out and down below this slope to minimize vibrations back here on the telescope. This area I'm circling now with the gold cylinder is the new water package that was put in to complete the water package. That was done during the pandemic as we were allowed to work according to the Chilean laws. So we have not stood still during the pandemic era. You can see a workers area here for the construction. This part will be used to lay down all of the many pieces of equipment, machinery to do the building. And then you come down this road and you come to support site 2, which has the technical buildings. And then down here, the larger number of buildings. This is a dormitory for workers. It can house about 180 and triples. Then you have down here a dormitory for astronomers and distinguished guests. They're basically 1 bed for 2. Okay. And then you have in here the food facilities, the recreation areas, and so forth. This is where we are. Our next step, in fact, let me talk about our next step. In other words, this is real. This is happening. The next step has to do with starting to assemble the telescope mount. Now, the telescope mount is probably the largest single contract we've led. It's about $150 million. And we did a worldwide competition. And in the end, we chose a combination of Ingersoll machine tools in the US state of Illinois and a design group in Germany out of Mainz. And this very week, we've started to cut steel. The design is completed. We've started to cut steel at Ingersoll machine tools. This is the new building that Ingersoll built with some defense contract money. And we gave them an advance of about $1.5 million so they could dig a pit here. Don't have a good shot of the pit, so that they could have enough vertical clearance for this telescope mount, right? 2,000-ton telescope mount. This gives you a sense of the scale of the mirrors. This is a mirror blank, and then it goes polished at the Richard F. Karras Mirror Lab in Arizona. You can see more of the excavation here. I don't know how to undo the overlay. And then this is a view inside of Ingersoll machine tools facility. So the big things coming up are pouring concrete casting the 7th and final mirror, although we might cast an 8th as a spare, casting the 7th mirror, this will be in October, and then letting a contract to build the enclosure. We now have a contract with a Spanish firm, EDOM, to design the enclosure and then to build the enclosure. This is something where Rebecca is infinitely better than I am because she's a real astronomer. But each of these 3 ELTs has certain advantages and certain challenges. We like ours because it has the greatest wide field capacity that you can use to then narrow in on a specific object. As I said, we only have 2 reflections before we get the signal into the instruments. We are able to have up to 10 instruments on that mount at any one time so that you can switch efficiently for one night of observing. There are 6 instruments in the initial instrument suite that are being developed. Claudia mentioned 1 or 2 of them. And of course, the fact that we are just down the road from the Magellan telescopes, I can't see it this way. They're off in this area. Carnegie's pride and joy, 2 Magellan telescopes, 6.5 meters. What we're going to do because of our affiliation with Carnegie is as these instruments get completed, the GCLEF, the Large Earth Finder, as that gets completed, it'll be completed before the telescope is ready. So we're going to put it on the Magellans and start to do science, do some testing. Nothing ever works the first time you put it on, at least it's complicated. But put it on the Magellans and do testing. And so the founders will have access to these state-of-the-art, sophisticated instruments that will go on the Giant Magellan. The founders will have access to use them on the Magellans. We know that was a big attractor for the Weizmann Institute to join. So where are we? As I said earlier, this is an investment for the next 50 years. This is something that will be a necessity if an organization wants to compete for the very best talent in astronomy, in optical sciences, in data management, et cetera. We think it is a terrific opportunity for people to grow their technical infrastructure. I mean, Weizmann is a pretty sophisticated place, but this is something that appealed to them. The opportunity to get involved in this level of technical sophistication beyond what they already do, the chance to take data on the Magellans with the new instruments, et cetera. And so for all of these reasons, I want to come back and thank Florencia. I want to thank Gabriel, everybody at the Inter-American Development Bank for making this visit possible. I mean, we talked about it, right? And yet everybody gets busy in life, but in fact, you all made it happen. So I'm going to stop now. I wanted to make sure I didn't use up the full time. So there's time for questions, time for discussion. We can talk resources, we can talk science. And when you get a science question too hard for me, I'll tell you I don't know, and I'll get Rebecca Bernstein to answer the question. So again, thank you for having me. It's just a real honor to be here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Robert and Claudia, for sharing your very inspiring work with us, and we look forward to the discoveries that will come from the GMT. My understanding is that we're actually going to move directly into the panel discussion, but save questions and answers for the end. And for that, we have several distinguished guests with us who are going to delve into the details about the opportunities that GMT can bring to the region in terms of investigation, educational opportunities, and knowledge. So to moderate that panel and to introduce our distinguished guests, I pass the floor to Gabriel Casaburi, lead specialist from CTI, the Competitiveness, Technology, and Innovation Division at the IDB. Gabriel, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Alison, and thank you, Robert and Claudia. This was so interesting. I'm just very excited to be able to host this webinar here at the IADB. I was honored to be invited to the building site. I think it was this year, and it's not only incredible in terms of the size of it all and the ambitious of what they're doing, but it's also it's moving, right? It makes you think about mankind. We are bombarded every day by the press, and knowing what humanity can do to planet Earth, and all the environmental problems and the wars, and suddenly you have this. A lot of people investing a huge amount of resources and time for the sake of knowledge, for the sake of knowing more about the universe, about where we are, who we are. So this is really exciting, and I like to congratulate everybody at GMT for what they're doing. In this section, what we thought is to bring some people that are related to astronomy in Latin America, to just have a roundtable and share some views on the impact that we can expect this project to have in the region and science in the region. So we have four guests, sorry. I'm just going to introduce in the order that they are in the agenda. So we have first Dr. Wagner Corradi. He's the director of the National Laboratory of Astrophysics in Brazil, and he's a full professor of physics and astronomy at the Federal University of Minas Gerais in Brazil. So welcome, Professor Corradi. We also have Dr. Gonzalo Tancredi. He's the director of the Department of Astronomy in the Universidad de la República in Uruguay, and he's the president of the National Association of Researchers. He chairs the SOC of the next Latin American Regional Astronomical Meeting that will take place in Montevideo in next November, 2023. His field of expertise is the small bodies of the solar system. We also have here in the roundtable Dr. David Hughes. He's a senior tenure faculty member of the Astronomy Department of CONACYT, National Institute for Astrophysics, Optics, and Electronics in Mexico. His research interests are focused on the formation and evolution of galaxies in the early universe. Dr. Hughes is the director of a large millimeter telescope and currently serves as the vice chair of the governing board of the Event Horizon Telescope, the EHT. And we also have with us Mr. Gonzalo Arenas. He's currently the head of International Affairs Office at the Ministry of Science, Technology, Knowledge, and Innovation in Chile. In his role, he oversees all international cooperation of the ministry, which also includes the astronomy area, and it means a relationship with all the other observatories and also Chilean institutions in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. So I like to start with a more general question that I would like to pose to all of you, all four of you, and is, what do you think from your perspective, from what you do in your countries, in your activity, are the opportunities that a project like this opens for Latin American science and for its astronomers? And maybe not only if you see that not only from science, but if there are other opportunities and benefits beyond astronomy that these huge international scientific facilities and investments can create for our region. So this is a question for you all, and I'd like you to go in the same order that I introduced you and following our agenda. So Wagner, if you can please start. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Gabriel, Robert, and Claudia for this nice introduction. And I think they already said everything about GMT, and no one can simply look at it and say, oh, we do not have an unprecedented opportunity, because astronomy is going to flip into this size of the telescopes from basically 10 meters, 8 to 10 meters to 25 to 40 or something like this. This is a huge change in the opportunity to enlarge our knowledge. And also we need to to learn how to do the instrumentation for this kind of telescopes. It's an ongoing adventure. And the industry and the innovation is the path that we need to follow in order to get the most of it, because it's not a very cheap investment, but compared to what we can learn from it, it's really very cheap if you look at. And the fact that NSF is able to and decide to put some funding, and we need to run to get and to complement it, this says for us that we are really in the right path. And from Brazil perspective, talking here from MCTI perspective, I think this is an important opportunity to go to. And we will need to discuss, I'll talk about it later, but I think it's, no one could even think of getting out of it. We have to go for that.
Thank you. Thank you, Wagner. Gonzalo Tancredi.
Okay, hello to everybody. So first, I have to mention that I'm coming from a very small country in South America. So my feeling about this kind of proposal, it's in two sides. On one side, I think it's a great opportunity, since as Robert has already mentioned, there would be the chance to, in some way, apply for time for this kind of telescope. But on the other side, from our small community, it's very difficult to get really engaged in this kind of big projects. Just to give some numbers, for example, it was mentioned that the total investment for this telescope is on the order of $2.5 million. This is 10 times or even 15 times the total budget that for research are developed that it's invested in my country. So the situation in South America and in Latin America in general, and in America in general, is that we have, let's say, several levels of develop on several level of countries, because we have, well, huge countries like US, Canada, let's say they have, then we have intermediate countries like Brazil, Mexico, Argentina, Chile. And then we have a lot of small countries. You at the IDB, you know very clearly that, well, there are over 20 countries member of IDB, but most of them are very small countries. So I think unless we think in a, let's say, in a common way that with organizations like IDB could help small countries to get engaged in this kind of very relevant international efforts, it's very difficult for us, a country like us, to get involved. So I'm happy for this kind of development for the entire science and in particular for astronomy, but it's difficult for us to get engaged unless we have we do it in a common work. We do it with all the countries in the region.
Thank you, Gonzalo. It is indeed a challenge. This big science, big ticket science, as they call it sometimes, for a country. Sometimes this one single item is larger than several of the budgets in the region to do about everything we're doing. So it is a challenge, and I think beyond any other answer that our friends can provide, getting together more and more to do big science within Latin America, I think is one way to go, to create scale by working together more. David Hughes.
Thank you, Gabriel. And also let me first just congratulate all the personnel involved in the Giant Magellan Telescope project, all the scientists, technicians, engineers, administrators, managers. It's a truly exciting project, and I wish you well. the question is, the value of such big projects within the Latin American region, not just in astronomy. I think this is something we will come back to a number of times, and Robert and Claudia have already, I think, mentioned from my perspective one of the key issues, and that is simply the demonstration of the ambition of not only the scientific community in Latin America, but also at a political level, at a governmental level, to support the construction of these next generations of major astronomical facilities, and taking advantage, in particular, of the landscape, the political landscape, but also the geographical opportunities that we have in Latin America to site and host the world's largest observatories. So I think it's a common theme that we understand the value of astronomy, astrophysics. It's in terms of presenting this topic to the public through various methods of communication and outreach. But really, astronomy is a tool to inspire a wide community, wider audience, particularly importantly, the younger generation of early scientists or people considering scientific opportunities. And so using astronomy to understand the power and the value of science, using astronomy through new projects like the Giant Magellan Telescope to explain the wonder of the physical universe, has a lot of follow-on advantages. In particular, the whole question, as again, I'm sure we'll discuss in this roundtable, the value of knowledge transfer, both between countries and within countries, even from projects like the development of the Giant Magellan Telescope to the next generations of engineers, technicians, and of course, creating those opportunities for new generations of astronomers. So I think we have this amazing opportunity ahead of us over the next few decades, with the construction of facilities that really offer orders of magnitude increase in sensitivity, in angular resolution across a wide wavelength regime. And so within Latin America, we're looking forward to the opportunity to conduct observations, in part led by facilities like the Giant Magellan Telescope, but then also supported by large observatories that are either under development at the moment or are already recently constructed, and so will become the natural scientific partners, if not financial partners, at least scientific partners in exploring the universe.
Thank you, David. Gonzalo, probably from the vantage of your point of view, if you can also reflect on what it means for Chile, not only this project, but the fact that Chile has so many other observatories in its territory that are smaller than this, but still very important. And as Florencia said, there is already 50% of the Earth's capacity to observe the universe are located in Chile. How do you see it from the point of view of Chile as a country?
Thanks, Gabriel. Well, thank you for the invitation. It's always a pleasure to discuss about astronomy and the place that Chile has in astronomy in the world. As you mentioned, we already have a large percentage of the observatories installed in Chile. It's always the number varies between 50 and 70%, and depending on how you measure, you do the measurement and what the baseline you use it. But it's kind of the epicenter of astronomy in the world. And because we have the clear sky, because we have the natural condition, but I would say, and this is important for this conversation, is that because during decades, Chile has developed a state policy to host this kind of observatories. So it's really a policy, a connection between the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the Ministry of Science that did not exist years ago, but really connection to be how can we best host this kind of infrastructure, and the benefits have been very clear on different levels in terms of outreach. So I believe Claudia mentioned it, has how Chile, the people in Chile see astronomy as something very close. It's because they have the observatories close, and they can see it, and it's obviously a gateway for a lot of the children to see. And you can see throughout Chile, even in the south of Chile, where you don't have the clear sky, but you have groups forming, and you have people interested in buying their own telescopes and going there. But in terms of science, the benefit has been, and let me use the word, astronomical, because it's not one telescope for a brief amount of time. It's many telescopes working in Chile for decades. So after decades, you really see the benefits. And for example, in the 90s, Chile did not have any PhD programs in Chile. So if you wanted to study astronomy in Chile, you had to go out of Chile. But now we have more than 5 universities with PhD. We have hundreds and hundreds of Chilean astronomers doing top-level research. Astronomy and astrophysics is the #1 area of science in terms of publication in Chile, by far ahead of other areas. So the impact of having those facilities in Chile has been huge. And I believe that there's an interesting reflection when we use the word facilities, and we leave out a bit the astronomic facilities, because obviously when we speak about observatories and astronomy and to astronomers, we're preaching to the choirs. We do not have to convince astronomers that this is a benefit for them and for the science and for astronomy. But it's interesting to look at these facilities. These are top level, and we've mentioned it, and we've had numbers, and you see that this is a challenge to build this kind of infrastructure. You're not building something that you know immediately how to build. You have to develop the process. You have to think about the best solution possible. You have to find the best providers to build this kind of infrastructure. And that gives us also the possibility to engage in technological development, and to think about how our companies, or how can we develop not only the science related to astronomy, but also the technology related to planning, building, and operating these kind of facilities. And this is a very important question for us in Chile. And it's also, I think, a very good challenge to have for Latin America, because I believe that astronomy and these kind of facilities and the cooperation within Latin America, we suffer from always looking up north when we want to cooperate. So every country in Latin America cooperates with the US, with Europe, with Japan, with China, and we cooperate very little amongst ourselves, in the region. So I believe that these kind of facilities also can be a promoter and a place where we can also use it to best build some partnership and cooperation within Latin America, and using these kinds of facility, because they won't be here for a couple of years. These facilities are built for decades. So we're not only speaking about 2020, 2030, we're still talking about projects that will be ongoing in 2015, 2060, and even beyond that. So it's very interesting to look at in the long term, not only in the immediate facilities, but also in the long terms, because these kind of facilities always need to upgrade their equipment, upgrade their instruments, and have a lot of challenges during those decades of operation. And we've seen with a lot of the telescopes we have in Chile. So there's a really interesting question about how can we as a region, as Latin Americans, use and benefit to coordinate better amongst ourselves and to better science, better technological developments within the region. And I think that really, this is a very good instance, but the question is really open, and it requires a lot of work and a lot of conversation to see how can we best benefit and participate as a region in those kind of projects. Because we've seen it we've not been there despite having decades and decades of telescopes in Chile. The question is very relevant.
Thank you, Gonzalo. You raise a very interesting point that I think is coming up more and more. That is how we cooperate more within Latin America in scientific issues. We at the IDB, we're always trying to promote regional integration and more cooperation between our countries. So we'll be happy to hear any proposal that if we can contribute to this more than what we already do in other areas. I have Robert raising his hand, Robert Shelton. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Gabriel. I just wanted to pick up on some of the comments that were made and express my appreciation for the insights that come from each of the panelists, whether they are in Chile, in a big country, in a small country. All of these, I think, point to the same factor, and that is, I'm going to express some sense of guilt here. We in the States have for generations been east-west oriented, maybe because early immigration came from Europe and then from Asia. And I certainly realized when I came to college in California and I got more of the Latin culture. And then certainly when I was president at the University of Arizona, the very strong, tight science and cultural connections we had with Mexico, our neighbor, that this hemispheric alliance can be incredibly powerful. We at GMT have benefited enormously, as you heard Claudia say, from the talent that FAPESP has brought, in some cases, to work full-time in Pasadena with us, and in other cases, many exchanges that go on. And I think that the opportunity continues to exist to do more. Not everybody has to do the same thing. Not everybody has to participate in the same way. It may be of greater interest to a smaller country that might be really excellent and superb in some kind of optics to contribute in that way. It may be possible, as we've seen with FAPESP and Claudia, they made an initial strong investment and they keep augmenting that, not only with cash, but by bringing people to help develop these instruments. And as Gonzalo correctly said, this observatory has a life expectancy of 50 years, and it will get better and better and better, not because the mirrors get better, the mirrors are the mirrors, but because the instruments will get better. My area, the solid state physics, there'll be better signal to noise. You won't have as much noise in all those little electronic parts, right? Certainly the analysis, someone posed a question about AI. How is that going to come into play? We're talking with Amazon Web Services about, you know, the operating systems of these observatories are really primitive. What can we do to partner with a company whose raison d'etre is to stay current and everything? It is a really unique opportunity. And then another question that came up was, how does the role of space-based observing come into play? Well, it can be spectacular as the Hubble and the Webb. I happened to be on the Hubble board when we got servicing mission 4 approved. Thank you, Senator Mikulski. And that's why the Hubble is still alive. But the Webb cost $10 billion. And you're not going to run a servicing mission to the Webb. It's too far out. So when it's done, it's done. And with adaptive optics, we can take out the Earth's atmosphere wiggle, and we can get, as I showed earlier, resolution that is 4 to 10 times better than the current space. So yes, I'm sure space will continue to provide fascinating data and information for astronomers and the general public. But in terms of a cost benefit and the ability for all of us to participate, not just 1 or 2 giant federal governments, I think this is where the action is for the next 50 years. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. Thank you, Robert, for answering some of the comments from our from the panel, but also the ones we already receiving through the Q&A. I was thinking of a few more questions from ourselves to the panelists, but also then start opening to the questions that we are receiving from the audience. I wanted to ask Wagner, in your role as a director of the National Astrophysics Laboratory in Chile, how do you intend to articulate all the demands of the Brazilian astronomical community, but how they can participate in the GMT in addition to FAPESP support? How do you see this?
Gabriel, I think this first we need to go to the astronomical community and discuss with them how could we get into this collaboration. And because it's not only our wish to join GMT, of course it's important. If you ask people, they'll say, okay, it's important. But we need to adjust how to bring this to MCTI, because FAPESP has already done the first movement and put some funding, and we need to ask MCTI how can they contribute. At first, I would go in this direction. And the second one, I think, is LNA is recognized worldwide for its capacity to build astronomical instrumentation. That's, I think, a way we could go on and collaborate if there's a chance to do that. I know the instruments are already being built, but we can collaborate in exchange for observing time. And as Robert said, it's not only the only way to participate is engaging with funding, but I have to discuss with the community and then to bring to MCTI. That's why I'm participating, and I thank you for this important chance to discuss and to hear from the other countries. Brazil is like the other countries in Latin America. We do not have a lot of money for science, and this is a major problem we need to overcome. You know, it's not only the wish to get the funding, but we need to convince people, and dispute is very hard. So that's the way I want to go, and I want to try and to make all things that I can to make Brazil to engage in GMT if it's possible.
Thank you, Wagner. Gonzalo Tancredi, I was going to take you up on your comment on the possibilities of collaboration. Do you have like any concrete ideas on how can this be improved? How smaller countries can benefit from these large science programs? I remember to visit in Brazil also the particle accelerator, I think it is. That is huge. You know, it's one of these big science projects that the logic says that you can only have like one in Latin America, as the Europeans have this huge one between France and Switzerland. So how do you think the smaller countries can benefit from these big ticket items?
Well, I think it's not only a matter of the smaller countries. It has to be done with the other countries. I mean, let's say the intermediate and even the large countries, because from ourselves, it would be impossible. Obviously, it would be impossible to get an extreme large telescope, but maybe it's possible to have let's say, a medium-sized telescope as a common collaboration. So my thinking is that we should work with organizations like IDB and the founders of the Giant Magellan Telescopes to get a way that small countries could get access to this kind of very large facilities. But in parallel, we might work with the countries in Latin America to have, let's say, our own facility. Let's take the examples of some of these small countries. I'm talking about Uruguay, Paraguay, Bolivia, Peru, Colombia. none of them has even a 1 meter telescope. Argentina has a 2.5 meter telescope. Brazil has also collaboration with other telescopes. Mexico has, but all the other countries, and obviously none of the Central American countries has even a 1 meter telescope. So, although we are going towards this very extreme large telescope, I think that also some intermediate size telescope could help the science in our countries. So I think we should we should try in different strategies. One is to go with international organizations like IDB and the Giant Magellan Telescope to get involved in these kind of things, but also to do other things with among the small countries and the small and intermediate countries. And the way to do it, well, that's a more political question, and it's difficult to know, because there has been a lot of efforts to do joint work among Latin America, and many of them has not been successful. In that respect, I think this meeting that you mentioned at the beginning that we are organizing in November in Uruguay, it's the regional meeting of the International Astronomical Union that will be held in November. It could be an opportunity to discuss this kind of projects. It has already been done in other meetings or other, but we have never come to a common idea.
Right. Thank you, Gonzalo. I'd like to take that a little further later on, because we have a question from the audience, and in several questions that actually they all lead to the same point of how can we, like from other universities, how can we access this? So I go back to that. But before that, on a related issue, I wanted to ask David, you're ahead of another huge project like this one, and I'm not a scientist, so I don't understand very well, but maybe you can clarify for us. Robert mentioned, when he mentioned other observatories, that they're complementary. What are the complementarities? How is it that they work together, or they could work together?
Thank you, Gabriel. Perhaps I could just make a brief comment first, just to put the LMT, the Large Millimeter Telescope, in context. So, as was just mentioned by Gonzalo, there are small countries that don't have major astronomical facilities within Latin America. Mexico, in terms of population, is a large country within Latin America, but the size of the astronomical community in Mexico is actually quite small. It's just a few hundred astronomers. And yet the LMT, the Large Millimeter Telescope, represents historically one of, if not the largest scientific projects funded and supported by the federal government in Mexico. So a general point, and in answer to your question, is that certainly over the last decades, one of the sort of most important astrophysical measurements that have been made has been to constrain what's called the extragalactic background lights. And so this is the light, the radiation that we receive with both ground-based and space-based telescopes over a wide range of frequencies, from gamma rays to the optical, through the infrared, and into the radio. And this light comes from basically every astronomical object that exists in the universe today. That light is being received by these multiple telescopes and measured, but also it's light that comes from the distant universe, from the early universe, from the early history of the universe. And so the critical thing in this measurement of this extragalactic background light is actually that it's dominated by two components, two spectral components. One is in the optical and infrared, and the other one is in the far infrared, in the submillimeter and the millimeter. And they each contribute about 50% of this extragalactic background light. So when you have two facilities like the Giant Magellan Telescope and the Large Millimeter Telescope within Latin America, and going back to this point about collaboration, regional collaboration, and supported by other facilities within Latin America that are also the largest of their kind. In the gamma ray regime, we have the Hawk experiment. I believe, I apologize, I forget the name of the other gamma ray experiment I'm going to hope I get this right, in Argentina. Other optical infrared telescopes, submillimeter telescopes in Chile, like ALMA. There's this amazing opportunity to study at different wavelengths and understand through those different wavelength studies the nature of the universe, both locally and the early universe. And when I talk about the nature of the universe, I'm really meaning, the formation and the evolution of structure, both planets, stars, galaxies, clusters of galaxies. And they each offer a different view of the universe. The optical infrared universe is in general looking at the more unobscured universe. The far infrared submillimeter millimeter universe is looking in a transparent way through the interstellar medium, the gas and the dust in both in our galaxy, distant galaxies, local galaxies, and providing a different view on the nature of the universe. So there's this great synergy between facilities. And when you have these next generation facilities like the Giant Magellan Telescope, like the LMT, like ALMA in Chile, and other ambitious projects in the future, there's enormous opportunities for collaboration. If that collaboration is not in terms of the financial contribution to a project, it certainly can be by exchanging telescope time. So giving countries that have a facility in a particular wavelength range, could genuinely develop and find collaborative projects that take advantage of some other major facility in a different country to which they've not contributed so far. But through scientific collaboration and through this synergy and need to combine observations at different wavelengths, I think that's certainly a path forward for developing in Latin America, this new capability with the world's largest facilities over the next decades. And I think that's a very exciting opportunity. And again, I come back to the fact that this should be a source of pride and inspiration for our respective younger generations, within Latin America.
Thank you, David. So we already talked about collaboration between the partners of each project, and then we talk about collaboration between countries, and now you mentioned all these other aspects about collaboration between all these giant scientific infrastructure to improve science, to improve knowledge, and it involves us all. In this regard, I would like to turn to Gonzalo Arenas. Someone in the audience said something like, all this is very interesting, but what's in it for us, for those of us who are not astronomers, right? It wasn't exactly like that, but kind of. And I imagine that specifically for you in Chile, that you have all this activity that is so visible. You may get that question a lot, maybe. Why? What do we get out of this, right? For the rest of the Chilean population. So you mentioned a few things before, and I remember even working for an IDB project that was financing like different initiatives, and some of them were about astronomical tourism in the northern part of a country. So what are other areas in which you think the rest of the population also benefits from having in your own territory all these facilities?
In many ways, and that's why it's important, I believe, to discuss this kind of project like the GMTO and other scientific infrastructure, not in terms of only of the science they do, because the thing is, we do not have to convince the scientists of the importance of this infrastructure. We have to convince the politicians, we have to convince all the stakeholders, and we have to convince the wider population that why is it worth investing this kind of money in this kind of infrastructure? Why do we invest billions of dollars? GMTO, $2 billion, ELT, 1.5 billion. So you have billions and billions of dollars dedicated to astronomy. Why? If we limit the vision and the conversation to the astronomers, obviously it might seem like very limited in terms of benefits. But the benefits go way beyond that. The one I mentioned, so outreach, how you're convincing and putting a lot of young children in a path towards science because they see the observatories, because they see the stars, and because they can relate to that kind of science. And you see it everywhere. So you see more people interesting from every ages, interesting in doing in science, not only in astronomy, but in learning more about the universe, how it is, what it's made of, how do the planets interact. And that's a concrete benefits in terms of we're reaching a lot of people. The other ones you mentioned, Gabriel, is, well, there's another area of economic development. You have astrotourism. That is a whole new category of tourism that is being developed in a lot of places in Chile. So you will see small places, small hotels, or small hostels having nights of observation, doing specific project, and you have those kind of tourism beyond the places where the telescopes are located. So wherever you have a clear sky, or some clear sky, you can see the stars and you can speak about astronomy and you can speak about the universe. And the other benefits that we see in which is that these are projects that are pushing the frontiers of science, not only in terms of astronomy, but also in terms of astrology, of technology, of engineering, of even Robert mentioned it, polishing of the mirrors. That seem maybe something very easy to do. It's not. And the ELT of ESO has that issue, and they're working on a specific way, on a specific process to clean and polish the mirrors without losing a night of observation. So this kind of technology, or when we build, I don't know, a stadium or anything like that, you have to be precise at the centimeter level or even beyond that. When you have to move the enclosure of a telescope, so everything moves and that does not affect, you're talking about sub-millimeter precision. So you have to develop the capacities and the technology to build those kind of sub-millimeter precision buildings at a place that is very hostile, above 3,000 meters, very dry, very harsh conditions. So the cement does not work at the same way it works at sea level. So in order to build those kind of engineering marvels that we have in Chile, you need a lot of technology, and you need to work on technology that does not exist yet, that is being worked on as the project it builds or presented. And it's not, again, it's not just one moment in time. Those kind of technology pull works for decades, because you need to upgrade the instrument, you have development that you want to put in, you have new capacities that you want to install. And so the benefits are very, very wide. And I believe that's it's always challenging for the economist to kind of put a price tag on those benefits, because how do you measure average? How do you measure the benefits of? So it's always a challenge to kind of put a specific price tag on scientific infrastructure. But I believe that the benefit, and I believe that David mentioned it, is let's not talk about this like these are ivory towers for the astronomers to speak among themselves about very, very distant topics. This is something that really benefits the wide, and we see it in other infrastructure. For example, CERN, you mentioned it also, the CERN has benefit scanners that we use in every day in the hospital. We wouldn't have probably the World Wide Web without CERN. So there's a lot of benefits because these projects kind of push the limits of human knowledge and human capacity. And the benefits goes wide in every areas of science, of the economy, and of social areas.
Thank you, Gonzalo. Very much agree
Gabriel,
with all you said. Yes.
I apologize for interrupting. I don't have my two hands, so I was doing it physically here. This is
Oh, sorry, I don't see you. Go ahead, Florence.
I do want to ask a question vis-a-vis society benefits, right? And I'm picking up on what Robert said about STEM and women and younger women, girls, but also STEM and diversity in general, right? And astronomy being such an interesting topic that it catches everyone's eyes, right? Just on a personal note, my son just finished a science program at the University of Michigan, and he took astronomy as his summer thing. And so he taught me, I just came back from vacation, he taught me for 10 days about astronomy, like, okay, Sean, give me a break. But anyway, this is a 15-year-old boy, right? And he's all over it. He's like totally into it. So how about the societal benefits of bringing the Latin American youth together through science? In a topic that is cool and it's interesting for all the youngsters. And I'm thinking about all the ninis, and that's a Spanish expression, but the ninis that we have in our region, those youth that neither work nor study, who are totally, unincentivized and lingering there, right? So how about thinking that could be a benefit to society? This is just a comment for people to react, but how could we, as ITV Group now, help in doing that? How do we create that kind of momentum?
I think it's a timely and really critical opportunity. Maybe it's been timely and critical for many years, and there have been small progress here and there. To me, this goes back to when I was a real scientist and had my labs, and having a role model that stands up there, having, as you saw in the case of when Marianne Cox, who is our software lead on our software engineering, was down in Chile, and it was arranged for her to speak to these 20 or 30 or 40 young girls. It would have had no effect if I was the speaker. Why would they look at me and say, well, who's that? Okay, so having the role model is really, really essential. And fortunately, there's been growth in astronomy. There have been problems as well. Okay, astronomy is made up of human beings. There are problems, there are assets. But I think we have so many excellent young women who are now at stages of authority, responsibility, visibility. My predecessor, Wendy Friedman, an extraordinary astronomer. She now holds an endowed chair at Chicago. She speaks all the time. So you can bring these people now to show that, yeah, I wasn't born with a golden spoon in my mouth. You can do this. There are opportunities. And I think the inspiration of astronomy fits in well with that. I did want to make one comment. Gonzalo, I need to bring you here into DC with me to talk to some of the senators and to their staff, because you were really inspirational. I mean that seriously, about how opportunities are more than just a few people looking through telescopes or reading the output of the charged coupled devices. And I was thinking at Arizona, one of the cases we made to our legislature, sometimes successful, sometimes not, was we related the astronomy economy in Arizona to the Super Bowl in football, American football. Okay, and that was, if you host the Super Bowl, it brings, I can't remember that, $300-400 million into the local economy one time. But the astronomy profile in Arizona brings that every year, year after year. So you can quantify it.
Sorry, we'll make one more comment. Sorry about that. But those of you who don't know her, Maria Teresa Ruiz is a Chilean astronomer still alive, and she was the first woman to receive the Chile's National Prize for Exact Sciences. She wrote 2 books. I happen to read both of them. She's well known for having discovered the brown dwarf La Enana Marrón, Kelu. So read her book and follow her. She's fantastic.
We tried to invite her, I think, and she was not available. Probably going on the same topic. I don't know if there are other questions in that I can't see in the room.
Does anyone
If
else?
not, yeah, go ahead.
I was just saying, I think there's no one else who has a question.
Okay, thanks. No, I was going to propose to kind of follow on question in terms of accessing the not only GMT but these large observatories. I remember someone was asking if other universities can access this from Venezuela. I think it was a question, and it made me think also in our visit to the site. They took us to see other observatories in the area that are already working. And they told us how new technologies are changing things. And for example, it's been the tradition that astronomers wanting to use the telescopes for their research, they will travel, right? They will go and spend a couple of months in Chile or elsewhere in Hawaii. And they still do that, but they told us they still do that because they like to do that. But actually today they can access that through the internet in their desk in their own universities. So that's, I was impacted by that because they show us a big screen. So you had the telescope and then you have another room with big screens and they told us this is where they work. And I said, well, but these big screens could be anywhere today. And they say, yes, actually, yes, you can have them anywhere. And thinking about that, I like to pose a question to all of you, any of you. And what do you think that the new technology, or do you think new technologies can really open up the access so that smaller countries, smaller universities, astronomers from places that usually don't have the ability to really access these facilities can do that today or even more in the future? That is open for anyone who would like to take it up. Yeah, Wagner.
Well,
oh, sorry.
You can go, David.
Go ahead, Wagner. Go ahead, Wagner.
I think it's innovation and all the technical advances we have made in the world. Most of them started with astronomy, with this desire to know yourself, to know where you live, from where you came, where are you coming to, and astronomy acts as a kind of vector, a director. It's, you want to understand something, and most of the time astronomy is making the questions before. And to do that, to do the science, we need to improve our technical condition. And that's the way we produce. Everyone nowadays has CCDs in their phones. It's because astronomy needed CCDs to get better and better and better. And for instance, in Brazil, LNA has contributed for something like in these dams, they were just falling apart. And one of our technicians worked with someone in the industry, and they produced a device to monitor the movements of the dam. So even if it's moving just a little bit, now we know it before. So that's the way we can get that. And that's the way I think smaller countries and everyone can benefit from that. And I was thinking here as the smaller countries in Latin America, we should talk and we could exchange observing time. And if we have GMT, and then we have a smaller telescopes to follow up everything that is discovered. And that's the way we can go. And science is bringing this advancement, the technological advancement. So it's there's no other way, because when to answer your questions, those very fine questions, you need to build very good instruments. And on doing that, that's the way you discover things, and you get some innovation. There's no other way. And not only for astronomy, of course, the other sciences, but astronomy is most of the time heading it. And I think it's important to move on that next level. So GMT and the other bigger telescopes are this chance for us to evolve, to go further. And there's no other way of thinking on getting to this new place other than just working together and doing more science and doing technological advancement.
Thank you, Wagner. David, you were about to say something before?
Well, it was just a very quick comment, which I believe your question was, do opportunities exist for smaller countries to take advantage of technology today or future technologies to access these large facilities? I believe that was the goal of your question. I was just simply say yes, absolutely. The capabilities for the majority of facilities now to conduct remote observing at some level. You might still physically have your telescope operators and support scientists at the telescope site with the equipment and the physical infrastructure. But a lot of the astronomers, a lot of the astronomy community, can conduct their observations in a remote way, and I think that's, as you pointed out, a particular advantage for some of the smaller communities, some of the smaller countries where perhaps the investment in science, particularly in astronomy, isn't as high. So it still gives smaller groups access to the world's best facilities, that capability. And through that, again, I would really like to acknowledge the comments that others have said regarding this capability that we have in Latin America at different wavelengths to coordinate our observatories, both the big ones and the small ones, the large facilities perhaps that conduct the groundbreaking jumps in the observations, and the smaller facilities that are able to do a lot of the follow-up work. And again, the advantage is not just in the creation of new generations of astronomers. There's a limited number. The truth is there's a limited number of permanent positions in astronomy, in academia, in all countries. But what astronomy has been amazing at is producing physicists, chemists, people working in computer sciences, the skills in mathematical modeling moving into economics, in engineering, and it's impressive, just the breadth of the skills that the astronomy community are able to produce. So having these remote opportunities to conduct observations isn't necessarily trying to create new communities of astronomers, but it certainly will and can create new communities of technicians and people and scientists and engineers. And I think that's the true value of this financial investment in Latin America to develop this next generation of telescopes.
Thank you, David. I see Robert raised hand. We have Robert's intervention as the last one, and then I will pass the floor to Gonzalo Rivas, our Chief Division, for closing the webinar. So Robert, please.
Well, thank you, Gabriel. There's so many viable, valuable themes that have emerged in this conversation by the discussion group. I guess I just wanted to pick up and summarize why I think the Giant Magellan Telescope I am the president of the organization. I should speak on its behalf. Why the GMT, I think, offers so many opportunities to the organizations, the countries that are represented here. I'm not here to claim one of the ELTs is better than the others. They're all going to have incredible impact on the world of astronomy and, as we've heard, on the offshoot technologies that come about, whether it's in optics, mechanical engineering, data processing. I mean, David, you really outlined them beautifully just a moment ago. But I think the way we are structured to welcome and to rely upon institutions, not just national governments. And those institutions, some of them are indeed heavily invested, enormously invested. Some of those who have been with us from the beginning have invested $100, $120, $130 million in commitments to the GMT. Total so far, we have $850 million investment. But some of the founders have made smaller, but every bit as important investments. Claudia mentioned the way in which FAPESP has just been a leader in the last few years in increasing their early investment with increments, and we welcome that. Our most recent founder, Weissman, I shouldn't say this, but they came in with an initial commitment of 10 million and going to raise that to 40 to $60 million. In other words, there's a flexibility here of getting involved at some level and then over time building upon that level as is appropriate, particularly if there's help from an organization like IDB. And I think the time is really good right now because in the last 8 months, we passed a critical review by the National Science Foundation, the preliminary design review, and the conclusion of this international review team of 20 people. They met with us for 2 days last December and then 2 days again in February, very rigorous. The conclusion was there are no technical showstoppers to build and operate this observatory. Okay? That was really essential for the National Science Foundation to hear. And so now we have in front of the National Science Foundation a modest proposal for $100 million. That's modest, you know, when you think about what our government spends, to finish this design and then to move into the construction phase, probably starting in early 2026. And so this is the time when an entry, even at a modest level, can be very influential in thinking about the next generation of instruments and thinking about how we can bring young people to work in Pasadena on an internship, how we can share opportunities with new founders. And again, Claudia spoke eloquently on that. She has been such a champion in identifying strengths in Brazil and in São Paulo and FAPESP that map onto what we need and working with our project manager. And so I guess I just want to conclude, and first of all, thank you for all the time you've given me. Thank you for everybody that I see and all of the long list of participants I can't see. Thank you for giving us some of your precious time, the most precious commodity we all have. And just say we are excited to the nth degree about where we are at the Giant Magellan Telescope. We know there'll be challenges, but that's why we want new founders. We love the financial support, but we also want the creativity. We also want the technological background, different brains thinking about things differently, because we've got some pretty powerful institutions in the States and abroad, but they don't have all the answers. They don't have a lock on all the wisdom and all the smarts in the world. And so anything we can do to expand the participation in Latin America, which is of course where it's being built, I think is a very, very good step for us. So I'm happy, I'm sure through IDB and others, if there are any questions that we haven't gotten to, you can just send me an email, and I may not be smart enough to answer it, but I've got a whole lot of people around me that can. So thank you.
Thank you, Robert. Thank you, Robert, for your final remarks. And I'd like to thank all the panel members for this wonderful roundtable. So with that, I pass the word to my boss, the boss of my division, Gonzalo Rivas. Please go ahead. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Gabriel. And yes, we are running out of time because it's very late. But I just wanted to stress two things. First, the question of collaboration in Latin America. As a member of the board recently told me, he asked me, okay, Gonzalo, we have been trying to push regional integration for many years in Latin America, and still collaboration in the scientific realm is very, very little and small. So wouldn't it be wise to start there before that we try to push in other areas which are more complicated? Because at the end, science is less politically and ideologically controversial. So I think that there is a great opportunity in that area, and we need, as a bank, need to take this more seriously. And for that, we need this kind of dialogue, because many ideas have come up here. And the second is the question of spillovers, and just an anecdote. You have mentioned many of the spillovers, and Gonzalo Arenas was very adamant about showing many cases and also others. I just wanted to highlight an anecdote. One day I went to the Office for Intellectual Property in Chile. And so they showed me a new software that they have that was for recognizing labels. And so that was a state-of-the-art software, because they told me before they took like 3 or 4 days in reviewing is seeing if a label was new or it was a copy or something like that. And now they were doing it in hours. And so where this software came up from, well, basically from 2 engineers that were working in the astronomy field, and they were experts in image recognition. And so they came up with, so they received this, people that were from this institution, and asking them, well, if you are so expert in this, could you come up with an answer for this? Because the software that we have is from Germany, is top notch, but it's still 4 or 5 days. And we have the intuition that this could be done, quickly. And yes, they produce this software. So I just point out this as an example, because there are 2 important things here. First, there was this idea that you have people trained, in very sophisticated software, imagery, etc. But second, that there were people in this Office of Intellectual Property that they knew that there were people working in astronomy in this. So because, as you said before, Robert, people in Chile knows about that Chile is doing something in astronomy, and they know that there is software involved and things like that. So that is my little grain of salt in this. And thank you again to all of you, Robert, particularly to you, but also to our guests that participate in the conversation, and to all the people that stay with us. Thank you again.
Well, and may I say thank you for all having such superb English skills. It is much appreciated. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you a lot.
Bye-bye.
All
Thank
the
you a lot.
best.
See you.
See you soon.
Bye-bye.
Bye.